I have watched the whole Rittenhouse case. I didn't know that Kyle put out a dumpster fire that was being rolled down to a gas station, meant to blow up, with people all around. I didn't know that law and enforcement were told to stand down as businesses were destroyed. I didn't know that Kyle's dad, grandma, and friends all lived in Kenosha, 20 minutes from where he resided with his mom part-time in Illinois. I didn't know that Joseph Rosebaum knocked him down twice and then attempted to kick him with lethal force to the head. I didn't know that Huber had hit him in the head twice with a skateboard. I didn't know that Gage Grosskreutz, a felon in possession of a firearm, aimed his gun at Kyle first, as he admitted on the stand. I also didn't know that in the state of Wisconsin, it is legal for Kyle to have a gun, even at 17, which was why the charge was dismissed. I didn't know that Kyle did not cross state lines with a gun he wasn't supposed to have. The rightful gun owner did, as he was legally permitted to do. I also didn't realize that Rosebaum was a 5-time convicted child offender, and that Huber was a 2-time convicted woman assaulting offender. I didn't know that Grosskreutz was a burglar with an assault on his record. If the media did their job, we would all have known this.
Well, the jury got it right in finding Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty on all charges. The reality is that the fact that these charges were brought before there was any serious investigation into what occurred is evidence that the government was actually motivated by politics from the beginning, which in and of itself should be considered criminal.
Well, looks like Wisconsin's gonna fucking burn tonight. All 5 charges. All 5 fucking charges. Not guilty. Unfucking real. If you don't know what white privilege looks like, look no goddamn further. Look no fucking further. He got away with murder and gets to walk scot-free. Unfucking believable.
Saying, are you going to condemn the actions of vigilantes like Kyle Rittenhouse?
We're looking at all of it. That was an interesting situation. You saw the same tape as I saw. And he was trying to get away from them, I guess, it looks like. And he fell. And then they very violently attacked him. And it was something that we're looking at right now, and it's under investigation. But I guess he was in very big trouble. He would have been. He probably would have been killed. But it's under investigation.
Well, look, I don't know enough to know whether that 17-year-old kid exactly what he did, but allegedly he's part of a militia coming out of the state of Illinois.
Why did President Biden suggest that Kyle Rittenhouse, on trial in Kenosha, is a white supremacist?
So, Peter, what I'm not going to speak to right now is anything about an ongoing trial, nor the president's past comments. What I can reiterate for you is the president's view that we shouldn't have, broadly speaking, vigilantes patrolling our communities with assault weapons. We shouldn't have opportunists corrupting peaceful protests by rioting and burning down the communities they claim to represent.
Race is an undertone in this trial. The consideration if Kyle Rittenhouse were a black 17-year-old running around with an AR-15, a pellet gun.
People are getting injured, and our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is to also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle, because I can protect myself, obviously. But I also have my med kit.
Does he wish he hadn't gone that night? Does he think he did anything wrong?
100 times over. You know, I've had talks, you know, Kyle said if I had to do it all over again and had any idea something like this could happen, I wouldn't do it. You know, and that is not, I want to be clear, that is not regret for what he did that night under those circumstances. Hindsight is always 20/20, if not better. And he didn't want to kill anybody. And he was left with a terrible choice, and he exercised that choice, which was found to be lawful.
Does he think he did anything wrong?
Legally, no.
Morally?
He wishes he didn't have to do it. But, you know, this case, as you said, has been so political, so yes or no. the narrative that came out was not the truth. At trial, it did come out. He had lived in that community. He had worked in that community. His family, his dad, his grandmother, aunts, uncles lived in that community. He spent a lot of time there. He went down there earlier in the day to help clean up graffiti, do those things. And when he was asked to help out at Car Source, he went. And, you know, so much was made that he wasn't an EMT. He did help people there. Nobody was harmed by Kyle Rittenhouse putting bandages or gauze on, and he went around seeking to help people. They wanted to portray him as a liar and fireman wannabe. I don't think that's what it was, but that was the narrative they needed to put forth to try and get a conviction on Kyle Rittenhouse.
Does he have concerns that maybe he could have done something else? Maybe he didn't have to fire. Maybe he could have fought. Maybe he could have gotten back on his feet. Does he ask himself those questions?
Mr. Rosenbaum could have stopped at any time and none of this would have happened. You know, his judgment in running after a person, as he yelled on the tape, and it was clearly visible, you aren't going to do SMFer. And he believed Kyle didn't have the guts to do it. He was wrong and he paid with his life.
Well, I don't know that it's guts. It's hard to believe that somebody chasing you is going to beat you to death.
Why else was he chasing him, Chris?
Probably to get him and beat him up, hurt him. Okay. Look, we don't know what he was going to do. All we know, now we do. This law, does it concern you how low a bar this law presents for now some 10 years, that there's no duty to retreat, that you put yourself in his shoes, not the reasonable person's shoes, that the prosecutor has to prove self-defense wasn't necessary by a reasonable doubt, unlike so many other state statutes? You worried about this being too low a bar?
You know, I don't think anybody with a brain is going to go out and say, I'm going to go kill somebody and see if I can get away with it in self-defense. I've done a lot of self-defense cases in Wisconsin over the years where it was claimed and hasn't been successful. And Kyle Rittenhouse is thankful that this was on videotape because it showed this individual's true intent throughout the evening. And, you know, if it was his word against the mob, he would have came in second.
Joining us now for an exclusive interview is Nicholas Sandman. Nicholas, thank you for joining us. I remember at the time what you were going through. And I remember that moment. And then the facts started coming out that everything that was said about you, that you had walked over to this Native American activist, for example, that you had, in fact, that you were a racist. You had the same false accusations leveled against you. And I remember thinking, when the facts came out, you handled this as perfectly, I felt, as any kid could. My question to you is, what is the impact on the psyche, on the mind, being thrust into the public eye like that, being called things that you are not, things that are not true? And then I want to ask you what you think Kyle should do.
Well, it's terrible, Sean, and I'll tell you why. As an 17-year-old in Kyle's case, and mine's 16, your mind is still developing. And so to deal with an overload of stress where you have this feeling that half of the country, hundreds of millions of people hate you for something that you were innocent of, but how you were painted, it can do a lot to you mentally. It takes a very strong will to be able to resist that and keep a level head. And I know that Kyle is probably dealing with that right now. It has been hard to kind of come back from the state I was in. I did watch a lot of Fox and CNN, MSNBC. I watched everything after the confrontation happened, and it was like a car crash you aren't able to look away from. My eyes were glued to the TV, watching my character get torn apart. And I know Kyle will face that journey of kind of getting back to the person that he was before. Of course, he won't ever be the same person again, but it definitely is a struggle. The biggest thing that happened to me, and what I've always said, is I became an adult at 16, and I had to learn very quickly that, you know, the moment I left my house, there could be a camera on me, and I've learned to look around and look over my shoulder in public. Not everyone likes me, and it doesn't matter where I am, I still get recognized by people all over even today. So it makes you, unfortunately, grow up in a lot of ways that most 18-year-olds don't want to do. And that's just the unfortunate reality of what happens when the mainstream media attacks you in the way that they did to me and to Kyle.
Kyle Rittenhouse. As to the first count of the information, Joseph Rosenbaum. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the second count of the information, Richard McGinnis. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the third count of the information, unknown male, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the fourth count of the information, Anthony Huber, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the fifth count of the information, Gage Grosskreutz, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty.
Forgive me for interrupting you.
Members of the jury,
Kyle Rittenhouse just fell to his knees in tears. He's on his knees. His lawyer's talking to him. He's shaking. It's upsetting to watch. It's like I feel like the media is just so awful, Andrew. They've been so disgusting from the beginning, and you can feel what this boy is feeling. This young man, his mother's in tears behind him. We forget people's humanity in the press. We just want to kill them. We want to go for the jugular. We want everyone to pay. And in this case, we wanted him to pay because he was a Trump supporter and he was a Second Amendment supporter and he wasn't on the side of the BLM rioters. And the media and the president and the governor put this kid through hell. And this is the only just verdict.
They had nothing. They had nothing close to a conviction on this case. And they threatened this kid with life in prison, an 18-year-old kid with life in prison, no possibility of early release. And they had no evidence that was close to disproving self-defense. To try to build a case out of nothing to put this kid in jail for the rest of his life, it's contemptible.
This was not a close case. This is a case that never should have been brought. The videotapes showed the story. You just had to believe your own eyes and ears and not the liars in the press and the politicians trying to get elected off of racial division. Right? That his presence there that night was based on the shooting of Jacob Blake, who was a black man by a white cop, which was ruled legally justified, including by this sitting president's DOJ.
There was literally zero evidence inconsistent with self-defense in this case. The state's own witnesses' testimony was consistent with lawful self-defense for every one of these criminal counts.
No one's going to do any soul searching. The media won't stop. They're probably trying to hunt down the jurors again right now. The judge has to worry. Kyle Rittenhouse still has to worry for his safety because of all the irresponsible coverage. They've all received serious death threats.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, the left is violent, right? The whole premise of these events was because they were burning down the city of Kenosha over the false narrative around Jacob Blake in the first place. Now, I guess we see what they do. I mean, there's 500 National Guards standing outside the town. Are they going to burn Kenosha down again because they're angry about this just verdict? I fear for the town of Kenosha. And it's not a big town, folks. It's a small town in America.
And I fear for this judge and for Kyle and the defense attorneys. The judge and the defense attorneys were literally just doing their jobs. This is how our system works. And this system is stacked against a defendant, white or black. You go into that courthouse with the weight of the state coming down against you. And that's why due process is so important and adherence to the rules is so important. And the prosecutors have a higher calling and an expectation to pursue justice and not just a conviction because they have so much power. And so for them to now be demonized, there was a piece, I think it was Charles Blow writing in the New York Times saying something like, this judge made rulings as though Kyle Rittenhouse was his grandson that he had to look at. Nonsense. There was prosecutorial misconduct for which they were rightly called out.
This judge did not make particularly favorable rulings for this defendant. All those motions for mistrials with prejudice should have been granted on the merits. This was not a judge that was eager to make decisions in favor of this defendant.
And he's notoriously especially protective of defendants' rights. Long before he ever heard the name Kyle Rittenhouse, he has a reputation for bending over backwards to protect the defendants who are in his courtroom, as it should be. What do you want, a judge who's more prosecution-oriented? Absolutely not. The system's already stacked in favor of the prosecutor. It shouldn't be stacked the other way. He doesn't seem to particularly like Mr. Binger, but you could understand why. Mr. Binger had done several irresponsible things, and so the judge got angry with him a few times.
Frankly, there's no question in my mind Binger should have been sanctioned if for no other reason than referencing Kyle having asserted his Fifth Amendment right and mentioning it in front of the jury, which, folks, for those of you who are not lawyers, you just do not do that. That does not happen. That right is sacrosanct, and you cannot have that right to remain silent used against you in a court of law. Period. It may not even be mentioned, and a career prosecutor knows this. That was no mistake. That was intentional.
And also trying to bring in evidence that he knew he was banned from bringing in, and he jumped into it with both feet, trying to suggest Kyle had a prior incident with a gun. So the prejudice that was stacking up against Kyle Rittenhouse from the beginning was enormous. And that's not even discussing things like the jurors being videotaped, the MSNBC reporter following the jurors, the intimidation of the jurors with the protesters on the courthouse steps, on it goes. And I have to say, this jury was very brave.
They were obviously facing tremendous pressure, certainly media pressure, social pressure. There's no social win for them by voting for acquittal. It could only be negative because the right doesn't attack people for simply delivering a verdict in court. That's what the left does. So the only threat was from the left. I expect, if we're right and in thinking there was one holdout, I suspect it was the jury foreperson. Juror number 54. But I suspect whoever that one holdout is will want to talk, because what tends to happen in these situations is, their social circle would have been against acquittal. They voted for acquittal anyway. Obviously, it has to be a unanimous decision, this acquittal. Now they have to go back to their social environment and kind of explain it away. And what we typically see happen is they'll come up with excuses. They'll say, if only I had known this evidence that wasn't admitted, or if only I had known that, I would have voted. I was misled somehow by the court process. So they can take the heat off themselves for having voted for acquittal within their social circle and place it someplace else. And to do that, they want to explain how it was that this, what they'll characterize afterwards as a mistake, happened. Frankly, I thought the defense in their closing argument should have made clear to the jurors that, listen, you have 36 pages of jury instructions. You have to decide how to use them, but we encourage you to start with self-defense first, because if you find self-defense, nothing else matters, and you can be home in time for lunch.
We the people. You ain't the motherfucking people, because you on the wrong motherfucking side. It's right or wrong. Right or wrong. Period. Ain't no in between with this shit. Ain't no in between with that shit. You out here talking about Kyle. Kyle should have never made it to trial, baby. Yeah, bring that bitch to my neck in the motherfucking woods. Little Rock. Bring that motherfucking pack of wood to Little Rock home and see what happens. Bring that bitch to the bitch. You can never be the people. Yeah.
Look at this cum dumpster right here.
You cum dumpster? Your mom was. She
hey, I can't be a cum dumpster.
You are. How?
How? I don't have a vagina, you dumb cunt.
You can swallow it, you dumb bitch.
Get the fuck out.
What you gonna do?
Hey, Rob, don't do that. What's up?
Stop! Stop! Get off!
Stop!
Hey.
Back up!
I didn't do nothing. She's the one that's doing it.
Back up! Fuck off! Oh shit!
Anthony! Anthony, you're gonna get arrested.
My boy, don't do that. Why are you trying to get up on me like that? I gotta get away from you. Can you do it like that? Hey, you okay, man?
Look like Kyle. I do not want Charlie in my privacy. Get this shit away before I freak the fuck out. No. Go, man. Stop that. You ain't.
Stay back. Stay back.
Fuck. You hit me.
Someone grab her. Hey. Don't get arrested.
Stay back.
You hit me. Stay back. Don't get arrested. No, you hit me. Get the line here.
Now y'all fucking hit me. Back up. That Mauser out. Back
up. Stay back.
Go forward. That's my knee.
Stay back now.
Hey,
go to the bank.
Why are y'all throwing out there? They just blessed my head. Oh, gee, y'all just blessed my head. Yeah, get all this.
That's why we trying to get
Back up. Stay back. Move. Let's go.
Put your hands on that man. Y'all ain't shit. Y'all are sorry as hell. Fuck you.
So we're in Kenosha, Wisconsin right now, and this is the site of the rubble, the wreckage, and what I've come to surmise is that this area that we're in, I believe, was a salon. Here we have hair products over here, and here we see for a woman's braid.
Mainstream media mockingbirds, celebrity scum, and Marxist members of Congress are all having a complete meltdown over justice being served in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, with him being found not guilty on all charges. And one of the talking points that they're all parroting is that the verdict would have been different if Kyle was black. Well, we know the answer to that. Remember Timothy Simpkins from Arlington, Virginia? He's that teen who brought a gun to school and then after got into a fight, pulled it out and then shot the kid he was fighting with and accidentally shot the teacher and another student. He was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, not attempted murder, and his bail was set at $25,000, and he was let out of jail the very next day. Kyle Rittenhouse was charged with 2 counts of intentional homicide and 1 count of attempted homicide. His bail was set at $2 million. Then GoFundMe, the most popular crowdsourcing website, banned him from fundraising for his defense. If anybody posted the videos on Facebook showing that he acted in self-defense, or even just simply said he acted in self-defense, those posts were taken down and those accounts were issued strikes, myself included. Countless liberal pundits on cable news, Democrat members of Congress, celebrities, even the President of the United States all slandered Kyle as a white supremacist mass murderer and continue to do so. And remember how the social media mob ran to Timothy Simpkins' defense, saying that he was being bullied in school, he was being beat up, and he had to pull out his gun and start shooting. Well, here's the police chief explaining what really happened.
2 weeks after a Timberview High School student shot 15-year-old Zacchaeus Selby and teacher Calvin Pettit and grazed a teenage girl, Arlington Police Chief Al Jones gave an update on the investigation.
This was not a bullying incident. And I just want to take that narrative out of the equation.
Oh, but that's nothing. Career criminal Andrew Coffey IV was also acquitted on Friday of murder and attempted murder charges after him and his father's home, a known drug home, was raided by a SWAT team serving a search warrant when he opened fire on the deputies. A deputy was injured, his girlfriend was killed in the crossfire, and his father took the fall for the drugs, and he claimed self-defense and was acquitted.
We, the jury, find Andrew Jeff Coffey IV as to count 4, attempted first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, Pat White, not guilty.
Coffey was also found not guilty of killing his girlfriend, Alteria Woods, who was killed in the crossfire after police say Coffey shot at Indian River County Sheriff's deputies during an early morning drug raid in 2017.
Seriously, a black man opened fire on police when they were serving a search warrant out of the drug house, and he claimed self-defense and won. So if Kyle was black, yeah, this whole thing would have turned out differently. Every Fortune 500 company, from McDonald's to Nike, would have issued a statement supporting him and donated to his legal defense fund. Celebrities would have fundraised for him, and Kamala Harris would have said that he reminds her of the son that she never had. And if Kyle was black, the district attorney, dozens of which are George Soros puppets, probably wouldn't have even charged him with a crime in the first place. The liberal cable hosts and pundits aren't just getting these stories wrong, they're lying, which is extremely sinister because it's critically important that the general public get the facts about these stories so that they're not whipped up into a frenzy and cause more chaos. They're worse than liars, they're servants of Satan, they are evil. CNN and MSNBC and twits on Twitter are still saying that Kyle Rittenhouse went to a protest. They won't even use the word riot.
A jury has acquitted Kyle Rittenhouse on all counts. Rittenhouse, who was 17 years old when he fatally shot 2 men and wounded a third with an AR-style rifle that he brought to a racial justice protest in August of 2020.
And today we are being asked to say that it is legal and to respect the rule of law because a white boy deputized himself and went out and terrorized people who were actually, using their constitutional right to protest.
The thing that concerns me is not just the violence, not just what this says about democracy, but now you've got members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, doing whole tweet threads, offering this kid everything from internships to an opportunity to hang out with them at the house. You literally have members of Congress who are now saying, forget an application, forget being a candy striper, who cares about your grades? Go out and kill people in the name of white supremacy, and you can get an internship in my office.
Cities across the country bracing for a second night of protests after the acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse. From New York City to Chicago to Portland, where police declared a riot after some in the crowd damaged buildings and threw things at police officers. The demonstrations happening after a jury found Rittenhouse not guilty of all charges connected to a shooting in Kenosha back in 2020. I want to go to my panel now. And David, I want to talk to you first. Yesterday, one of the head of the NYPD actually texted me shortly after the verdict that the entire personnel under the NYPD were ordered to stay on shift for fear of backlash. I don't know if you agree, but my thought on this is that the reason for the backlash has to do a lot with all the misinformation being reported by several media outlets. They're now trying to backtrack their reporting. There are so many facts that we're missing. Case in point, many Democratic politicians questioned whether, Rittenhouse was there in Kenosha the night of the shooting. It turned out he was already in Kenosha. He had family there, including his father. The gun was also in Kenosha. It also turns out the gun was not illegal, which is why the minor carrying a weapon charge was dropped.
He was working in Kenosha.
All of this is what has enraged America.
Well, I say this is what's dangerous about the left unleashed, and we're now seeing them fully on display, because not only at the NYPD, where you and I probably know some of the same people who've been there for a while, but around the country, as I spoke to my sources and others on the back channels, they were talking about this. A lot of officers concerned about this precinct level. And when you look at one of the things reported by the Daily Caller, and they were instrumental in this case, even more so than a lot of the legacy and left-wing media, they were saying burn the precinct, every city, every town, so police departments knew what was coming.
Oh, by the way, someone in Orange County just got killed during a fight when someone hit them with a skateboard.